Hey everybody, it's Audrey from Audrey Approved. If you know my channel, then you probably know Olive over at A Book Olive, and you also probably know that it's about to be Nonfiction November. And so today I want to do kind of a Nonfiction November TBR video and recommendation video. I think as somebody who already reads, I think, a decent amount of nonfiction, I think my favorite part of Nonfiction November are the prompts. And so Olive has provided 4 different prompts for you to choose your books from. And so today I'm going to go through each of those 4 prompts, and I'm going to give one book that I recommend and one book that I'm planning on reading in the month of November. The first prompt is fraud, and this is actually a subject that I really enjoy reading about, especially lately. And so a book that comes to mind that I would recommend is The Missing Cryptoqueen, The Billion-Dollar Cryptocurrency Con, and the Woman Who Got Away With It by Jamie Bartlett, which is a book that I read and finished, I think, in August. It's based off of a BBC podcast. I wasn't familiar with the podcast before I picked it up, but this dives into the history behind the cryptocurrency OneCoin and the woman and founder behind it, Aja Raden. This is an absolute crazy story. I think that I would recommend this book not for like exquisite storytelling per se, but for just the craziness that is the real life story. Aja Raden is at the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. She's missing. She's the missing crypto queen that's referenced in the title. And she really rode the wave of hype around Bitcoin to create her own cryptocurrency called OneCoin. But it differed in that it was basically like an MLM scheme and a Ponzi scheme. And she defrauded people of I think it was $4 billion. Ironically, the one place where it wasn't that popular, I think, is in the United States, where I live. And so I had never heard about it before this, but I think this is a wonderful pick for this subject. It's a story of hype, of FOMO, of really just the gap between technology and regulation when it comes to business and to finance. So it's a crazy ride. Again, very direct, simple storytelling, but the events themselves make it, totally worth picking up. For my pick for fraud for this next month, I'm going to choose The Orpheus Clock, The Search for My Family's Art Treasures Stolen by the Nazis by Simon Goodman, which combines fraud with another subject that I really like, especially this year, which is fine art. And so the author this is a memoir, and the author comes from a long line of, I think, German Jewish bankers, and they were quite wealthy, and they ended up collecting this kind of massive art collection, which during World War II was looted by, the Nazis and by other people. And so this author tracks down his family's art collection, and frequently I think he finds these pieces in famous museums and famous collections, and they're fraudulently held in those collections because they weren't obtained through rightful and through honorable means. I think one of the pieces that the author tracks down is a piece called The Orpheus Clock, hence the title. And I find within fine art the kind of stories about lost art or forgotten art or stolen art are some of maybe the most interesting for me. So I'm hoping to get to this, and I'm also hoping to get to a whole video about books that I've read recently that are, about fine art or artists or things like that. So look for that, hopefully, in the month of November. For the word web, I, like many people, have chosen to interpret this in a kind of biological sense. I'm not going to talk about any books with spiders. I haven't read any. I don't really want to, but I have chosen to interpret this, again, evolutionarily. So for my recommendation, I'm going to give Your Inner Fish, The Amazing Discovery of Our 375 Million-Year-Old Ancestor by Neil Shubin. And Neil Shubin is a paleontologist and evolutionary biologist, and this covers the discovery of the fossil Tiktaalik, which is basically this fish with elbows. And it basically had these elbows that it would then kind of pop itself up out of the water. And why, I guess, paleontologists are so interested in this type of fossil is because it represents one of the species that may have existed and bridged kind of aquatic life and terrestrial life. This is one of the very first pieces of popular science or popular history, probably popular science, that I ever read. I read it as actually part of a class in college. It was a class that I had to take a class under a certain category. I ended up just absolutely loving it. I've read more books from this author, but this is definitely my favorite. And I think if you're looking for something that has to do with evolution and with fossils, then you might like this because it's told really well and it's a very kind of accessible piece of science. For my read for web, I'm going to talk about a book that covers the history of the human evolutionary web. Maybe I'm stretching this a little bit, but I'm going to read Cave of Bones, A True Story of Discovery, Adventure, and Human Origins by Lee Berger and John Hawkes. Now, I read another book by Lee Berger earlier this year. I read Almost Human, I think towards the beginning of the year. And that book covered, Lee Berger's kind of time, growing into his role as like a paleontologist. And he goes through like the discovery of this cave system in South Africa in what is called the Cradle of Mankind. It's a whole kind of region where they found a lot of, ancient hominid bones. And it's this like crazy story about this cave system that was like incredibly complex, and these like cavers like happened to come across this small little alcove where they found all of these bones that were jumbled. And Lee Berger comes in and he talks about how, this is a new species on the Homo tree. So we come from, a whole evolutionary line as Homo sapiens. And I think the number one thing that I took away from that book was just the extent of our evolutionary tree. Because I knew about Neanderthals, I knew about Homo sapiens, I knew about Homo erectus, which comes even before Neanderthals, but I didn't realize just how many different species there were. And so that was one of the biggest takeaways that I took away from that book, and I'm hoping to learn even more in this one. This is a follow-up from that book. It released, I think, a few months ago, and it talks about what else they learned from this cave system that they happened to discover. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for this one. Again, I think that the writing is not, like, it's very direct. It's not like exquisite writing, for example, but the content makes it worth picking up and reading for me. So yeah, I'm excited to get to this one as well. For Capital, there's kind of two ways I interpreted this, and my recommendation takes this in more of like a geographical way. So I think capital, I think Washington, D.C., I think politics, and then the book that I want to recommend is Sisters in Hate, American Women on the Front Lines of White Nationalism by Seyward Darby, which was released in 2020, and I read back in 2020, and I thought it was just absolutely excellent. This is a book that focuses on 3 women that have joined the alt-right movement in recent years, and it covers the reasons why. And I think as a liberal woman, it was really enlightening because it was a glimpse on, I guess, like, I don't want to say the other side, but I'm going to say it anyway. It was a glimpse from the other side that was emotional and intimate and true, and I still fundamentally disagree with a lot of things that these women believe, but I have, I guess, more compassion for them. And I think that one of the things that stood out to me so much was just the reasons why women join the alt-right movement. Of course, these are just 3 different examples, but from the examples, it was rarely inherent racism or xenophobia. It was just like a desire for community and for familial bonds. And so, yeah, I thought this was really well done, really well executed. I would totally read something else from Seyward Darby. I should check if she has anything else that's coming out. But if you want to read something that leans political, this might be an option for you. I'm going to go a little less political for my choice. I'm going to interpret Capital as wealth and how we hold wealth. And so I'm going to go with Stoned, Jewelry Obsession, and How Desire Shapes the World by Aja Raden, which is all about different jewels and pieces of jewelry. And so I think this traces 8 famous stones and the history behind them, and I'm sure the author is going to talk a little bit about, human desire for beauty, human desire for wealth. And so I think this is an appropriate pick for Capital. I do really enjoy micro histories. I think, again, they're just diving deep into subjects that I never would have, thought about or picked up on my own. So I'm excited that this prompt has pushed me to finally get to Stone, which has been on my TBR actually for quite a long time. For display, one of the ways in which we display our thoughts is through writing. And so when I interpret it this way, I think about a wonderful book that I read last year, which was The Writing of the Gods, The Race to Decode the Rosetta Stone by Edward Dolnick. And the Rosetta Stone is a literal stone. I think it's in the National Gallery in London. I know it's in London. And the Rosetta Stone was first found or rediscovered back when Napoleon invaded Egypt, and when he did that, he brought along a whole bunch of scholars that may have just been, rich and wealthy men, and they basically raided and looted a whole bunch of historical sites. And so one of the things that they found was this stone that was inscribed with all this writing, and what they realized is that it was basically saying the same proclamation, but in 3 different languages. And one of those languages was in hieroglyphics. And so this provided the key in order to decode hieroglyphics as a language, so people could, go back and read all of the different Egyptian hieroglyphics that they found in all these different cultural sites. I absolutely love reading about linguistics. There was another book that I read last year called, I'm blanking, but it was about Linear B. I know I've talked about it multiple times. I'm gonna put the cover up. That one is also about, uncovering, a hidden language without knowing what the language is or how to read it. And yeah, I just feel like Egyptology as a study is something that, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an Egyptologist, but how many other countries and cultures have a whole, ology attached to their name? So I think this is also not just a history of the Rosetta Stone and how it was decoded, but just the science of Egypt and the history of Egypt and the interest in that as a whole. Interpreted another way, display is also how we show ourselves to the world. It's how we display, our personality and ourselves. And so for this, I'm going to read Status Anxiety by Alain de Botton, who used to run, or maybe he still does, he runs an organization called The School of Life. They have a YouTube channel. I think they have physical classes too, but they also release books. And I would say that their content is very much popular philosophy meets maybe a little bit of popular history meets self-help. And so this book is called Status Anxiety, and it's all about why we care about what other people think about us. And so I don't love self-help as a subgenre just in general, but this book has been on my physical shelf for so many years that I figured that this was a good excuse to finally get to it. So we'll see what I think about Status Anxiety. And then lastly, I'm going to be doing a buddy read in Nonfiction November. This is my very first buddy read. I'm going to buddy read over with Tiffany at ToweringTBR. And if you like my taste in books, then you should check out her channel, because I do think we have quite a bit of overlapping taste. But I saw in one of her videos, she has a bookcase in her background. I saw the spine of this book, and I had asked her what she thought of it. And turns out she hadn't read it yet, so we are going to do a buddy read, and that book is going to be Eating to Extinction, The World's Rarest Foods and Why We Need to Save Them by Dan Saladino. And this is all about a loss of food diversity in our diet, and many of the foods that we eat come from a single strain of whatever that crop is. And so I really like food and food history as kind of a genre within nonfiction. I have a whole video about it, and maybe I need to come out with a second one because I've read quite a few books in the subject since then. But yeah, I'm excited for this buddy read. I'm excited for Nonfiction November, and you can let me know if you've read any of these or what you're excited to read throughout the month. But look for, I will try to come out with a few kind of nonfiction videos in the month of November. And yeah, until then, I hope you guys are doing well, and take care. Bye.